Chapter 9, Manifestations. Mia Passup. I have never felt like this before, to look at someone and hope that someone could tell me all about my past. I do not remember anything at all. Miro was now walking in front of me, and even though the days had made me familiar with his scent, which was a mixture of sweat and lemon, there were no memories that could come out of them. And I always thought that more than anything else, it was this sense of smell that could make memories manifest the most. I let out a deep breath, frustrated. These twins were mine, and yet they were not. I did not understand what I was feeling, but something about them felt wrong. It was not that I did not like Miro because of the way he was. If at all, his weakness only made my affection towards him grow stronger. The same was true for Goemi. She was a sweet girl who looked up to me with longing. A loving sister to her twin. A loving daughter. And yet, the feeling of uneasiness would not go away. How could I expect to know the twins when I could not even remember anything about myself? Not my face nor the color of my eyes. Nor the size of my feet. And my name, Mia, it sounded so odd to my ears. When the imp threatened us earlier, I was surprised to find that I could tackle someone so effortlessly. True, the imp was much shorter than I was. Still, I was not as helpless as I thought. Maybe someone had trained me in the past? Mama, do you think it's such a good idea to run away from them? Goemi asked. The boy and his friends suddenly flashed inside my head. There's no other way. I don't want them to discover Miro's power. I was appalled when I learned that my son could freeze a heart. To do that is murder, and if anybody learns about it, my son could end up dead. The power was so vile that it scared even me. But, Mama, Miro doesn't really mean to hurt anybody. And I can always revive those whose hearts he freezes, Goemi insisted. That was the other surprise. At least it was good to know that there was a balance in their powers. Regardless, the reason Goemi provided will never be acceptable to the townsfolk. If we had not run away from the imp and the two children we met, Miro's life would have been endangered. As with Goemi's. And I could not let them face the people alone. I would protect them. I may be uncertain of my identity, but I was definitely sure that no sword would touch my children without having to pass through me first. This is no time to argue, Goemi, I said. Be quick. We have to be out of Loondu soon. Miro stopped walking. He was hunched as he cocked his head to the right in an apparent attempt to listen to what was ahead of us. Danger, he said. I stopped, oblivious of what could be hiding in front of us. I grabbed both their hands and turned the other way. Keep quiet and move swiftly, but try not to bump into anything. Goemi tugged at her shawl and looked worriedly around her. Miro, however, moved at a leisurely pace as though he was familiar with the road. From behind us, the thunderous hoofs of palace horses grew louder, and I did my best to run faster while still going about as quietly as I could. I looked around, hoping to find a hiding place. To the right was a cave that could cloak us, but it was easy to spot because of its height. Maybe if we continued running, the soldiers wouldn't be able to catch up to us. Miro glanced back, and I saw his eyes glaze. Miro, no. Miro looked at me as though he understood, and he continued running with me. But he loosened from my grip. He reduced his speed so that now, Goemi and I were a few yards ahead of him. Upon seeing that her twin fell behind us, Goemi loosened from my grip and slowed down. There was no doubt in my mind that she would protect Miro in case somebody threatened us yet again. The sound of galloping horses was deafening now. I caught my breath when a group of palace soldiers materialized behind us. What do we have here? A soldier asked, his head still covered with a helmet. His companions were also wearing armor and looked ready to fight. Goemi flinched, and she took her twin's hand. I rushed back to my children. Upon reaching them, I steeled my face to hide the fear I felt inside. Vagabonds traveling to Dirella, I said. Now, where did that place come from? Bits and pieces of my knowledge seemed to be coming back. A perilous time to be traveling without a proper escort, my lady, the soldier suspiciously said. He climbed off his saddle and removed his helmet, revealing the face of a young general who looked like he had fought battles and had won. There was an air of confidence that I could not mistake for arrogance. The sooner we travel, the sooner we'll reach our destination. Coins are hard to come by, and we cannot afford escorts, I said, hoping that the soldiers would continue on their journey without any other annoyance. General, a soldier from the back said. "The woman is very pretty," he said before grinning maliciously. The young soldier in front of me regarded me with interest. He did not look old enough to be a general, and yet his aura exuded authority. He walked past me, eyes glued to my face. That was all it took to make me tremble. I gripped my children's hands tightly and tilted my chin up, glaring at the soldier that spoke. But the general went back onto his horse just as quickly. Then he said, "Pardon us, my lady. We didn't mean to bother you. You may continue with your journey." There were grunts from the pack of soldiers, then the general put his helmet back on and started galloping away. I stood with Miro and Goemi, relieved. The other soldiers passed by. They looked grim and tired as though they had been traveling for quite some time. I caught sight of a man with yellow hair. His eyes narrowed when he saw me. Then his mouth opened, and he kicked at his horse to go to the general. My heart started to beat fast, and I pulled at the twins' hands. "Run," I hissed. "Let's go back." The twins ran back to the woods, but if the soldiers were to pursue us, I was sure we would not have a lot of time to put distance between us. There were giant trees all around where we could hide, but these soldiers were trained to hunt, and if we were not careful, we would end up as captives. I did not know why anybody would have any interest in us, but I wish I did, because not knowing the reason made us so vulnerable to anyone's attack. We ran harder, running for our lives. I caught sight of Goemi's determined face, and it only urged me to go farther. Miro had a grim expression on his face. His usually blank eyes were angry. I paused to catch my breath. There had to be a way to save my children. The soldiers will surely be on our heels, and I had to stop and fight them. Let the twins run away. Then, I would find a way to escape the soldiers and look for the twins. "Go," I told Goemi. "Bring your brother somewhere safe. I will distract them. And then I'll look for you." Goemi's eyes were panicked. "No, Mama. We can't let you face them alone. Let's run together." "No, listen to me. It's me they're interested in. Go and hide. I will find my way back to you." It was weird having to say those words. As though they were from a distant memory. It was like all this had happened before, the pursuit, the fear of losing my children. But there was no time to overanalyze now. "Run. Promise me you'll keep your brother safe," I hissed. When Goemi still would not budge from where she was, I pushed her. "Go," I yelled one more time. Miro grabbed his sister's hand and started running away as though he understood the situation's urgency. Goemi glanced back at me one more time, eyes watery. I mouthed to her, "It's all right." Goemi nodded and then scampered with all her might. Truth be told, I did not know what to do. My leg throbbed from the wound the imp gave me, and I had no strength to wrestle a trained soldier, let alone a bunch of them. But I had to do what a mother must, so I pulled my knife and gripped it tightly. If it came to killing at least one of the soldiers, it had to be the general. Before fighting them, though, I had to find out what they wanted. A few yards from where I was, I saw the flash of a golden-haired boy wearing a hat crouching down on the side of the tree as though he was tying something to it. He looked at me and yelled, "Run, my lady. Run." My mouth opened, and I was about to ask him to run too. This was no young man's business. Suddenly, the girl he was with appeared from the side and sprinted towards me. "My lady, if we don't run now, we're going to get caught," she said, panting. I was confused, but I dared not speak. The boy looked determined as he watched the approaching soldiers. Dust flew behind the rampaging soldiers' horses. It made the soldiers appear more sinister. I was frozen to the spot. "Now. Come on." The girl pulled at my hand. "But your friend?" I asked. "He's going to get caught. Arden can manage to escape all of them," the girl said. Then without another word, I ran towards the direction where my children had gone. The hoofs were getting closer, and I prayed that the boy, this Arden, would survive this. I glanced back at where he was earlier, but I did not find him there. "He's gone." "Where did he go?" I said through gritted teeth. If I could not take losing my children, then it sure was not all right to see another boy die because he wanted to save us. "He's going to be all right. Keep running," the girl said, sure of her words. From behind us, I heard the horses and the soldiers scream. I quickly looked back and watched as, one by one, the soldiers fell from their horses. The horses, too, fell as though there was an imaginary line blocking their paths. I watched their tiny figures as the soldiers were thrown in the air and crashed to the ground. The horses ran wildly after the sudden, abrupt loss of their masters. The soldiers struggled to recover, astounded by what happened. There's no time to watch. Arden's a magician. He will be able to catch up to us, the girl said. I nodded and hurriedly ran away again, hoping that the boy was safe. With a smaller number of horses, the soldiers would take time to reach us now.
The Swordless Swordsman. Those filthy soldiers fell for my trap. I was unsure that it would work, and I knew I gambled a lot. Not only my life but also Quila's. But I could not let the new acquaintances be captured. There was something about their powers that struck me as odd. Besides, I owe my life to the girl. I needed to at least find out what her name was. I stepped lightly and swiftly, away from the pile of soldiers. A horse passed by me, and I grabbed its reins and quickly rode it. Soon I was galloping away from the commotion. No one was going to discover what happened, at least not for a little while, and before the soldiers learned about my trick, we would have escaped them by then. I galloped faster, looking for the tracks that Quila left behind her. She was not used to this kind of life the way that I was. In the marketplace, I often saw this girl watching me with wide eyes as I performed. When nobody else had paid me any mind, the girl remained to be my only audience and cheered me on. Quila has been my fan ever since. At her tender age, she was still learning her power, whereas I was already performing several tricks using my ability. Then one day, as I was resting and eating a piece of stale bread, she approached me. This little girl had a crush on me, no doubt. I smiled at her and teased her about it, which looking back now, I think was a mistake because doing so only made her insist even more on coming with me. I glared at her and told her that traveling was no life for a lady. She giggled, probably overwhelmed to be addressed as a lady. I will be Akea's most renowned magician, I told her, boasting about my abilities. Do it again, she said enthusiastically. I obliged and threw a pear in the air, then slashed my arm as though wielding a sword and watched as the pear was cut into two perfect halves. I slashed at it again before the pear hit the ground, and when the pieces finally fell, there were 8 of them, split equally, perfectly. Quila gasped, covering her mouth. I want to learn that too, she gushed. I chuckled, shaking my head. I started developing genuine affection towards the chubby girl. You have a different power. Something that would be useful to you later on if you keep on practicing, I said. When we became friends, I told her about my dreams. Being a waif, I got to stay in one place for a month or 2. After which, I would gather my things and move on to the next town without saying goodbye to anyone. This was how life had been for me ever since I ran away from my family. When I went to Karasthea and met Quila, it was the only time I had to say goodbye to someone before leaving. She sobbed so hard while I said my goodbyes. But I don't want you to go, she said. Cheer up, chum. We'll see each other again, I said, touched that for the first time, I meant something to someone. Take me with you, Quila begged. I promise I won't be of any trouble to you. Liquid oozed from her chubby nose, and I grabbed the bottom of my shirt and wiped her face. Oh, but you already are. I laughed. Grow up well, and I might take you with me. It was an empty promise, something I said to make her stop crying. In my heart, I knew that it could take many moon turns before I would ever go back to Karasthea. I grabbed my pack and kissed the top of her head before waving goodbye. Looking at her tear-streaked face, I felt an uncertain kind of emotion tug at my heart. Something that I had never felt before. Maybe Quila opened up in me a longing for tenderness. Perhaps I was wrong when I thought I did not need to belong to a community, to a family. But I was not ready to take her with me, no matter how much she insisted on being part of the circus I so wanted to build. I laughed at Quila then because the truth was, I had no idea if my dream of ever putting up a circus show would ever materialize. I mean, it would have involved lots of gold coins, and a waif like me only had as much as a few pennies. But Quila ran after me. I was unaware that she had been following me for more than a week. If someone had not told me that my sister was rummaging food in the trash bin, I would never have discovered her. I threatened her that I would hide from her if she did not go home. So I traveled more carefully, trying to lose the young Quila. To my dismay, though, I found her shivering in the woods surrounded by a pack of wolves. She was holding a twig, which would have easily broken if one of the snarling wolves had attacked. Even if I always told myself not to get involved with anyone else to protect my identity, the sight of Quila defending her life ignited something inside of me. That was courage, I told myself. So I rushed towards her and slashed at the wolves, instantly killing 2 beasts. Then I kicked at a few more wolves until the pack dispersed. Afterward, I was left with a nasty cut on my elbow, which Quila tended to. I remembered looking at her plump face as she covered my wound with bandages. She was so cute, a little chubby girl who was lost in the woods. And right then, I could not bring myself to send her away. That was moon turns ago. Now was the only time that I felt the urge to protect someone again. And that someone was the girl who gave my life back to me. I hoped with all my remaining strength that I could catch up to them soon enough and ensure their safety.
Quila Tash. I squeezed the lady's hand tightly. I was so scared. My chubby legs were not used to running the way Arden's were, and it was not fair of him to make me run like this. And for what? For the adventure he owed me? Next time, I would bite my tongue and not ask for any more adventures from him. This was definitely not worth it. Do you see them? I asked. The lady shook her head. Straight ahead. We'll get to a clearing soon enough, she said. I continued running and running some more. The sounds the soldiers and horses made had grown softer until soon enough, I could no longer hear them. My heart raced again when I heard hooves. Dear gods, no. Please don't let me get caught. Arden, I would curse you if the soldiers put their hands around my tender wrists. Hiya! A familiar voice shouted, and I turned to see Arden riding one of the palace horses. He was grinning like the stubborn rascal that he was. Didn't I tell you I'd get you a horse? He asked as his grin grew wider. I don't know how to ride one, I said in between breaths, smiling as relief flooded over me. Climb up, he said as he outstretched his hand to guide me. Careful, or you'll hurt the horse. I told you to stop munching on the potatoes, he teased. Shut up, Arden. Shut up, I retorted as though there was no one else. Arden laughed. He was holding the reins to another horse. My lady, he said. Do you know how to ride a horse? The lady frowned and started shaking her head. But then there was a spark in her eye that hinted of a memory returning to her. She walked forward and took the reins. Carefully, she placed one foot on the stirrup, and then, as expertly as though she had done it 100 times before, she effortlessly pushed her body up and pivoted over the horse's body and landed just as effortlessly onto the saddle. She kicked at the horse and pranced. She laughed giddily like a child. I can't believe it. Arden was watching her. You have a way with horses, my lady, he said. She nodded, smiling. It seems I do, she agreed. I'm Nia Passup, not a lady. Call me Nia. She kicked at the horse and started galloping away. Arden followed. By the way, Nia shouted as she trailed off, thank you. I glanced at Arden. He was grinning like an idiot. Apparently, pretty people had that effect on him. Arden tipped his hat as though to accept the gratitude. Then we rode hard, I assumed, to look for Nia's children. The twins. I was huddled against a boulder beside Miro, waiting for Nia. My twin was motionless. He need not say anything, but I knew he was worried too. She'll come after us. She won't be captured. Don't worry, I whispered. Miro's eyes lost their focus. Freeze. Hearts, he said. I shook my head. No, Miro. You can't keep doing that. You can't freeze anybody's heart on a whim. Please, I said. There's got to be a way to control his power. Miro ducked his head between his knees. His shaggy hair fell to the sides. Do you even hear me? I asked, grunting. Try to control it, all right? You do want us to stay safe, right? Miro's shoulders tensed. Because if you do, you have to be careful about how to use your power. Do you remember the boy earlier? The one whose heart you froze? If he were bad, he would want revenge, and that could endanger our lives. Even Mama's. Miro's head sprung up, and he looked at me. Do you understand now? I asked, impatience gnawing at me. Miro said nothing, but he tilted his head as though in acknowledgement of what I said. That was a good enough response for me. Now, all we have to do is wait, I whispered, trying to hide the uncertainty in my voice. I could not let my twin see how scared I was, or I might find him losing control over his power. Who knows what he could do should that happen? That was why I had to be careful. I had no intention of unleashing his hatred upon the world. The gods know how many hearts he could end up freezing should that happen, and I could only run to tend so many. Our powers, though balanced, did not work similarly. His power could be used from a distance, but mine only worked with physical contact. There were sounds of hooves to my back. I flinched. I squeezed Miro closer. Come on, I said, lowering my voice. We then crept behind the bushes. I prayed that no one else would see us. I pressed a finger to my lips and kept my eyes fixed on my twin, wishing that he would not pick this moment to be noisy. At that moment, I could hear his breathing clearly. It was ragged and shrill. I moved my head to see where the noise was coming from, and to my surprise, I saw Nia on a horse. Mama! I shouted. Nia glanced back, her shawl falling down her back, her brown hair swaying as she swiftly turned. A big smile blossomed from her face as she hurriedly jumped off the horse like a cavalryman and landed on her feet, perfectly balanced. She ran towards Miro and me and embraced us, kissing us alternately. Relief flooded my chest, and I squeezed her tightly towards me. It's going to be all right, Nia said. I pressed my cheek against Nia's shoulder, thankful that she came back to us. I could sense that Miro felt the same. It was weird, though, because he was not smiling like he used to. If you're done with the reunion, I think we should continue on our journey? A boy's voice broke the silence. I raised my eyes to see who spoke and stared at a handsome young man. He was smiling at me, and yet I scowled at him. Nia pulled back and glanced at the boy. This is my daughter Goami and my son Miro, Nia said. And I'm Arden Ruby Moeller. And my friend, Quila Tash, the handsome boy said. I stared at them. I could not take my eyes off of Arden. Earlier, I was fascinated that he tried to defend the imp from us. Then I stared at his lifeless body when I unfroze his heart. And now, smiling, I realized that I had never before set eyes on such a beautiful boy. The girl he was with, Quila, frowned and put a hand on Arden's waist. I think we should leave now. The soldiers could gather their horses pretty soon, and they could find us sooner than we thought. Panic, everyone, she said hastily. Nia nodded. Wait. I want to thank both of you for saving us, Nia said earnestly. Saved us? Arden and Quila saved us? How? The story could wait, though. Arden blushed. No, it's nothing. If it weren't for Goami, I would have been dead, he said as he looked at me. I felt my cheeks go hot. Quila rolled her eyes and tugged at Arden's sleeve. He was also blushing as he gazed at me. Then he tipped his hat and winked at me. Come on, he said. We'd better hurry. Just like that, he rode off with his chubby friend. She glanced at me as though scrutinizing me from head to toe. I could feel that my cheeks were still hot, and I touched them with my hands to make them go back to their natural color. Nia climbed the horse again. Then she pulled Miro to ride with her. Let's go, Goami, Nia said, smiling. I was grateful that she did not mention anything about my flushed cheeks. I sat behind Miro and put my arms around his waist. My face pressed against my twin's back to hide my embarrassment. And when I thought the incident would pass by without me feeling mortified, Nia said, So you have a thing for pretty boys. I pressed tightly against my twin's back and grunted. Mama. I chastised her. But Nia only laughed before she kicked at the horse and started trailing after Arden.
Renner Kalo. The soldiers were scratching their heads in unanimous fascination and confusion. Nobody was hurt except for an aging soldier who refused to be left behind in our quest to find the boy the Emperor wanted to lay hands on. He had served the palace for more than 30 moon turns, and yet he always refused to take his retirement whenever it was offered to him. "How many horses did we lose?" I asked. 8, Dante mumbled. "The other soldiers are still looking for them, but it seems that the chaos earlier agitated them enough to make them more difficult to catch." 8 was not a disastrous number, although it will definitely make the pursuit slightly slower. "We could buy horses in the next town," I told myself. "For now, some men will have to share their mounts." "What have the men found out?" I asked. Dante pursed his lips. "Nothing yet. It must have been some trick which caused the horses to run amok." I frowned. Horses never get rattled like that if there was nothing to cause them distress. There had to be an explanation for all the commotion. I started walking towards where the first horses fell. To that particular location where it was as though someone drew a line to trap us. I knelt on the ground, and I noticed several soldiers were doing the same. "General," someone shouted. I gazed up, sweat coursing down my forehead. Louis trotted towards me. "Look what I found," he said, handing me a rope. I raised my eyebrows in confusion. "This was the cause?" Louis nodded. Dante was immediately by our side. "But if this was what caused us to fall, it had to be raised at least to a grown man's waist. And yet, nobody saw it?" I asked. "I was among the first riders, and I can attest that I did not see anything barring the road," Louis said, massaging his waist. He grimaced, obviously, he was hurt. "What else did you find?" "Nothing else. The rope was the only logical explanation." "It isn't logical. How do you explain a rope this thick to go unnoticed? Even if we were all keen to capture the vagabonds, our eyes are trained to see the slightest distractions. And yet, nobody noticed this." "That's true, General. There's got to be some force, or some power to explain what happened here," Louis said. Dante frowned. "The distraction is taking too much of our time." He turned towards me, eyes urgent. "General, if we don't go after them now, the lady will put miles between us, and capturing her could take some time," he said. "My men stand more important than this woman," I said sternly. "But this lady, I tell you. She is Kino's mother. I saw her on the school grounds many times before, and the palace soldiers pursued her during the festival. That was before Dogan Ronda took her away," Dante insisted. "She will bring us to Kino." When my expression did not change, Dante uttered in frustration, "She's the royal scribe. Don't you recognize her?" "She's not my priority," I said. "I never acted on impulse before, and look at what my first unplanned act did to us. We're lucky nobody died. It's the work of an amateur, otherwise, we could have found our group missing soldiers instead of horses." In all honesty, I could not remember seeing her before. Most of my time was spent outside Canella doing missions for the Emperor. Dante's jaw hardened. "The mother will bring us to the sun," Dante kept on insisting. "Did you see the boy?" I asked, irritated. "No," Dante whispered. "But she could have hidden him. We'll get horses to replace the ones we lost. And then we will spend a night in the nearby town and plan on how to go on with our search for the boy." "The boy would never be found if you are not going to act on instinct," Dante said fiercely. It was new to me to see this man in such an enraged state. A slow smile spread across my face. "Is that so?" I asked. Then I clobbered him in the face with my fist, and he fell backward. He touched his face and looked at the blood in his hand. "Does that feel like acting on instinct enough to you?" Dante stood up, ignoring the other soldiers who immediately surrounded us. He shook his head and eyed me as though he wanted to fight me, but at the last moment, he lowered his eyes. "My apologies, General," Dante said humbly. "I forgot my place." I nodded. I did not want to shame him, but a general has to do what he must. "We will find the boy and his mother, but we must be cunning about it. I was not named general to be beaten by a rope." "I understand," Dante said. All around us, the soldiers dispersed and continued mounting the horses that we were able to gather. I did the same and put on my helmet. Let's ride. We'll find her soon enough, Dante, I said. And I was confident we would. The masked warriors have never had a task they failed in. And each success was all because of my careful planning.